Welcome back to our channel, where we explore stories that blur the line between fact and folklore, mystery and nightmare. If you're new here, don't forget to subscribe. Every week, we bring you another true crime bedtime story, the kind of tale that keeps you listening deep into the night, when the world outside is quiet, and every creak of the floorboards feels like it might be more than just the house settling. Tonight, we begin a journey into a case that remains unsolved to this day. A story whispered about in travel forums, retold in late-night documentaries, and etched into the memory of a quiet town in Hertfordshire, England. This is the story of the Ashridge Hostel disappearance. It was the summer of 2003. A group of 5 university friends had been backpacking across England, their trips stitched together by train tickets, borrowed maps, and the kind of optimism that only comes with youth. There was Mark Ellison, 22 years old, quieter than the rest, known for scribbling into his small leather notebook whenever the group stopped for a meal. There was Sarah Green, outspoken, sharp, the planner of the group. Peter Lang, jokester, heavy sleeper, known for carrying more snacks than clothes. Emily Shaw, warm and restless, with a love for ghost stories that had followed her since childhood. And finally, David Hunt, steady, pragmatic, the unofficial leader of the group. Their plan was simple: spend 2 nights at a budget hostel tucked in the woods of Ashridge before catching a train south. It was meant to be just another stop, one more cheap bed on the way. The Ashridge Hostel was not what they expected. From the outside, it looked like a converted lodge, built of stone and timber, the kind of place that might once have been charming but now sagged under the weight of years. The paint was peeling from its shutters, and the wooden porch creaked with every step. Inside, the smell of damp lingered. The hallways were lined with faded wallpaper, and the floorboards groaned beneath their feet. Their room was a long dormitory with iron-framed bunk beds, each mattress covered with thin blankets. The window overlooked the woods, where the evening sun cast shadows long and dark. The walls seemed too thin, the silence too heavy. The group joked to mask their unease. Peter laughed about budget horror movie settings. Emily whispered about cursed woods. Sarah rolled her eyes but insisted they keep the door locked at night. Only Mark seemed distracted. He stood at the window for a long moment, staring into the trees, before opening his notebook and writing something quickly. When David asked what it was, Mark just shook his head. They met the hostel's owner briefly, Harlan Pike, a man in his late 50s with thinning hair and eyes that didn't linger long on faces. His voice was polite but clipped, as though hospitality was something he offered out of duty, not kindness. "Breakfast is at 7, he said. "Check out by 10. Lock your door. The woods aren't forgiving at night." He left them with those words, his footsteps fading down the hall. The group unpacked, talked about the long train ride, and finally settled into their bunks. Sometime near midnight, Emily swore she heard footsteps in the hallway, slow and dragging. Sarah, already half asleep, dismissed it as the old building. But Mark sat upright in his bed, notebook in hand, listening. And though no one else noticed, he didn't write that night. He only stared at the door, as though waiting for something to open it. By morning, nothing had happened. Not yet. But within 24 hours, one of them would vanish without a trace. And the Ashridge Hostel would never again be remembered as just another cheap stop on a student's journey. The first morning at Ashridge Hostel broke quiet, the pale light of summer filtering through the thin curtains of the dormitory. The group stirred awake to the sound of crows outside and the faint smell of fried eggs drifting up from the kitchen. Harlan Pike served breakfast himself. The spread was sparse: toast, jam, weak tea, and eggs that looked slightly undercooked. He hovered at the edge of the dining room while they ate, his eyes scanning the table, though he barely spoke. Peter joked about continental horror cuisine, earning laughter from Sarah and Emily, but Mark said nothing. He picked at his food, his gaze wandering to the guest book on the counter. The hostel's guest book was a worn leather ledger with yellowing pages. Travelers had scrawled names, dates, and little notes. Great stay, or bed's a bit creaky but nice woods. But toward the back the handwriting shifted. Messy entries, short phrases that read more like warnings than reviews. Don't stay in room 3. The nights are too long here. Listen for the footsteps. Mark lingered on these lines, his hand brushing over the paper. When Sarah teased him about his writer's curiosity, Mark closed the book quickly, his face unreadable. That afternoon, the group set off to explore the Ashridge forest. The trees were tall and ancient, their branches knitting together into a canopy that dimmed the sunlight. The air was damp, the ground soft with moss. Emily pointed out the ruins of an old stone wall half buried under ivy. Looks like something out of a monastery, she said. David nodded. There was one around here centuries ago. Dissolved during Henry VIII's reign, I think. Mark scribbled notes, muttering almost to himself. Places where people vanish don't start with the vanishing. They start with the forgetting. Peter laughed nervously. And you're the poet who's going to get us killed. On the edge of the woods sat a small village shop. While buying snacks, Emily struck up conversation with the elderly cashier, who lowered her voice when asked about the hostel. Bad place, she said. Always has been. Folks go in, don't always come out. Happened before. David pressed her, but she shook her head. Not my story to tell. But mark my words, that house keeps what it wants. Mark stood still as stone during the exchange, his hand tightening on his notebook. That evening, the group returned to the hostel. The hallways seemed darker than before, though the same weak bulbs buzzed overhead. The air carried a faint smell of mildew, and every step echoed as if someone walked just behind. In the common room, Peter suggested they play cards. Sarah agreed. Emily wandered to the bookshelf, pulling down a battered collection of local folklore, but Mark excused himself early. Headache, he muttered, retreating to the dorm. When David later checked on him, he found Mark sitting upright in bed, notebook open, eyes fixed on the door. On the page, only 3 words were written, over and over again. Don't follow me. That night, as the others drifted off, Sarah thought she heard the faint sound of footsteps in the hallway again. But when she sat up, the dorm door was still closed, locked from the inside. Mark didn't sleep. He kept his eyes on the door until morning. Evening laughter. Despite the eerie stories from the shopkeeper and the unsettling notes in the guest book, the group tried to keep spirits high. After dinner, they gathered in the common room again, playing cards under the yellow glow of the old ceiling lamp. Peter teased Emily about her love for ghost stories. Sarah teased Peter back about his constant appetite. Laughter echoed, filling the cracks in the hostel's silence. But Mark stayed quiet. He sat in the corner, notebook in his lap, his eyes flicking between the door and the darkened hallway beyond. The warning. Later that evening, Sarah noticed him writing. She leaned over, playful at first, but froze when she caught a glimpse of the page. This time, instead of random scribbles, Mark had written a full sentence. Someone is standing at the end of the hall. Sarah glanced toward the doorway, but there was nothing there. Only shadows shifting as the lamp flickered. Mark, she whispered, you're scaring me. Mark closed the notebook. I didn't write it, he muttered. It was already there. Sarah pulled back, unnerved, unsure if he was joking or unraveling. Lights out. They returned to the dorm around midnight. The room smelled faintly of damp wood, and the beds creaked as they settled in. David locked the door carefully. No strange visitors tonight, he said, half joking, half serious. One by one, the group drifted into uneasy sleep. But not all of them stayed asleep. The conflicting memories. At 3 a.m., Sarah swore she heard footsteps, slow, deliberate, crossing the wooden floorboards just outside their room. She sat up, listening. The door never opened. Yet the sound of movement, shuffling, pausing, then continuing, was unmistakable. She whispered toward Peter's bunk. "Do you hear that?" But Peter only groaned and rolled over. In the morning, when she asked again, he laughed. "No one was there. The door never moved. You dreamt it." Emily, however, claimed she heard something different. Not footsteps, but a faint scratching on the wall near her bed. David swore the night was silent. And Mark? Mark said nothing at all. He only wrote in his notebook before breakfast, his hand trembling slightly. The notebook. Later, Sarah caught sight of the fresh page. This time it wasn't words, but a crude drawing. The outline of a figure standing at a door, faceless, its hand reaching for the handle. At the bottom of the page, scrawled quickly, were the words, "Don't follow me." The group phrase. By breakfast, tension simmered. Sarah insisted she heard someone in the hall. Peter mocked her for being paranoid. Emily claimed she wasn't sure what she heard. David tried to calm them all, but his voice lacked conviction. Only Mark remained silent, his eyes fixed on the guest book on the counter, as though waiting for it to reveal something only he could see. The next morning, the hostel seemed unusually still. The air was heavy, the kind of silence that presses against your skin. At breakfast, the group sat in near silence. Peter pushed his toast around the plate, Sarah tapped her spoon against her teacup, Emily stared at the window. Only Mark seemed focused, his eyes fixed on the hallway door, as though waiting for someone else to walk through. When Harlan Pike finally appeared, his greeting was curt. "You'll be staying another night?" David nodded. "Yes." "We leave tomorrow." Harlan's expression tightened. "Not everyone does." Then he walked away. Back in the dorm, Sarah confronted Mark. "You're not sleeping. You're writing creepy things. You scared me last night with that page about someone standing at the door. What's going on?" Mark hesitated, then said quietly, "You don't see him?" The room fell silent. "See who?" Emily asked. Mark's eyes shifted toward the far corner of the dorm. "The man who stands there at night, watching." Peter laughed nervously. "You're joking." But Mark's face was pale, his voice low. "I thought everyone saw him." Later, when the others went outside, Mark lingered in the lobby. He flipped through the guest book again, his finger tracing one entry scrawled across the page. "He waits until you're alone." The handwriting was jagged, hurried, almost identical to his own. David found him there. "Mark, this is in your head. You've been tired, that's all." But Mark shook his head. "No. He's in this place. He was here before us. He'll be here after." That night, the group locked the door again, but unease filled the room. At some point after midnight, Emily woke with a start. She swore she saw Mark sitting upright in bed, whispering into the darkness. "Who are you talking to?" she asked. Mark turned slowly toward her, his eyes glassy. "He says not to follow." By morning, Emily told the others what she'd seen. David insisted Mark was sleep-talking. Sarah was less sure, but Peter's response was blunt. If he doesn't get his head together, he's going to lose it. What none of them admitted, not even to themselves, was that Mark's words lingered, echoing inside each of their minds. Don't follow. A strange morning. The fifth morning at Ashridge Hostel began in confusion. Sarah was the first downstairs, heading straight for the dining room to fetch tea. But when her eyes fell on the guest book left open on the counter, she froze. A new line had been scrawled across the fresh page in hurried, jagged letters. "One of you won't check out." The ink was still fresh. Denials. The others soon joined her. Peter swore it wasn't his handwriting. Emily looked pale, shaking her head violently. David studied the entry, muttering, "It looks like the same hand that wrote those warnings before." Mark said nothing. When Sarah pressed him, his only response was, "I told you. He writes through people. Maybe through me. Maybe through you." That answer only deepened the unease. Tension over breakfast. Over breakfast, no one touched their food. Peter tried to laugh it off. Maybe Harlan's playing games, hostile horror theater. But Sarah snapped back, "This isn't funny. If it's him, he's threatening us. And if it's not, then who wrote it?" Harlan Pike entered the room briefly, carrying a tray. His eyes flicked to the guest book. For a moment, his jaw tightened, as if he recognized the words. Then, without a word, he turned and left. The group splinters. The unease spread through the group like poison. Emily clung to David, whispering that they should leave a day early. Sarah insisted they needed to confront Harlan. Peter, restless, muttered about setting up a watch that night. Only Mark remained detached, staring at his notebook. On the page, he had copied the new line from the guest book over and over. "One of you won't check out." When asked why, he replied simply, "If it's written enough times, maybe we'll know who it belongs to." The silence of the hostel. That evening, the hostel seemed emptier than usual. No other travelers were visible, though Harlan claimed there were guests upstairs. The hallways felt hollow, the walls too thin, the air too cold. Every sound, the creak of stairs, the groan of floorboards, carried like a whisper. By nightfall, the group locked themselves into the dorm once more. The waiting. Emily refused to sleep. Sarah sat against the door with her back braced. David dozed uneasily, Peter clutching a flashlight in his hand. Mark wrote steadily, page after page, his face unreadable. At 3:00 a.m., the scratching sound came again, louder this time, right against the door. Everyone froze. And then, silence. The morning after. When they opened the door at dawn, nothing was there. But in the guest book downstairs, a new line had appeared beneath the warning, "Don't follow me." The handwriting matched the one Mark had been using in his notebook. The morning after the second guest book entry, the group sat around the breakfast table in tense silence. No one touched the food. The words, "Don't follow me," hung over them like fog. Finally, Sarah spoke. "Mark, why does the handwriting in your notebook look exactly like what's in the guest book?" All eyes turned toward him. Mark didn't flinch. He flipped his notebook open, showing them the page he had filled through the night. Rows and rows of the same phrase, "Don't follow me." "I didn't write it," he said calmly. "It writes itself." Fear and frustration. Peter slammed his fist against the table. "Stop with the riddles, Mark. Either you're messing with us, or you're losing it." Emily's eyes filled with tears. "You need help, Mark. This isn't funny anymore." But Mark only shook his head. "You don't understand. It's not me. It's him. He uses me to leave messages. He wants me gone. He wants one of us gone." His voice dropped to a whisper. "Maybe me." The confrontation. Back in the dorm, David tried to take the notebook from him. Mark resisted, clutching it to his chest. "If you take it," Mark said, his voice low and urgent, "he'll just find another way to speak. Better it's me than you." Sarah stared at him, her frustration mixed with fear. Mark, listen to yourself. You're talking about a ghost riding through you. Do you hear how insane that sounds? Mark didn't answer. He only stared at the corner of the room, the same corner he had mentioned before. The host's eyes. Later that day, Emily caught Harlan Pike watching them from the end of the hallway. His expression was blank, but his eyes lingered on Mark longer than on the others. When Emily told David, he dismissed it. He's just strange. Doesn't make him guilty. But Emily whispered, "What if he knows what's happening to Mark?" The night watch. That night, the group agreed to set a watch. 2 awake at all times, rotating until morning. Peter and Sarah took the first shift. Hours passed in silence, broken only by the creak of old wood. At 2:57 a.m., Sarah shook Peter's arm. "Do you hear that?" Footsteps, soft, slow, moving just outside the door. Peter held his breath, flashlight in hand. Then, the scratching again, this time louder. As if a fingernail dragged along the wood, Peter swung the flashlight at the door. The sound stopped instantly. When they opened it, the hallway was empty. Mark's sleep. Back inside, they found Mark sitting upright in his bed, eyes open but unfocused, whispering to himself. Sarah leaned closer and heard the words, "Don't follow me, don't follow me, don't follow me." She shook him. "Mark, wake up!" But he didn't stir. His hand moved across the page of his notebook in the dark, scrawling the words blindly, as if guided by something unseen. The fear deepens. By dawn, everyone was shaken. David tried to rationalize it. Sleepwalking, stress, suggestion. But the others weren't convinced. Sarah whispered what they were all thinking. If this keeps going, it won't just be words. One of us really won't check out. And Mark, pale and exhausted, only muttered, "That's what he wants." After another sleepless night, the group gathered in the common room. Sunlight streamed through the dusty windows, but the tension was thick. Sarah was the first to speak. "We can't keep pretending this is just in our heads. The guest book, the noises, Mark. None of it makes sense. We need answers." David hesitated but nodded. "Then we talk to him. Directly." They all knew who him meant. They found Harlan Pike in the kitchen, wiping down the counter with a damp rag. His shoulders were hunched, his movements deliberate, as though he had been expecting them. "Mr. Pike," David began carefully, "we need to ask you something about this place." Harlan looked up, his gray eyes sharp. "You're not the first to ask. You won't be the last." Sarah placed the guest book on the counter, open to the warning. "Who wrote this?" Harlan stared at the page for a long moment, then set the rag aside. "Does it matter? The words are true enough." Emily's voice shook. "There are stories about you, about another hostel, another disappearance." For the first time, Harlan's expression cracked. His jaw tightened. "That was years ago," he muttered. "A boy went missing. And never found. They blamed me because I was the last one to see him, but I had nothing to do with it." Peter leaned forward. "And now it's happening again." Harlan's gaze darkened. "If you believe that, you should leave. Tonight. Don't wait until morning." David tried to press him. "What's in this house, Harlan? What's happening to Mark?" The owner's voice dropped to a whisper. "This house has its own way of keeping guests. Some leave, some don't. The walls remember. The floors remember. Sometimes they even speak. That's all I'll say." Then, more firmly, "Check out now while you can." They left the kitchen shaken. Peter cursed under his breath. That's it? He admits it's haunted and tells us to leave? Forget that. I'm not letting him scare us off. Emily was pale. He's hiding something. Maybe he knows what happened to that boy. Maybe he knows what's happening to Mark. Sarah's voice was sharp. Or maybe he did it. Then and now. David tried to steady them, but doubt flickered in his eyes. Mark's silence. When they returned to the dorm, Mark was waiting. He hadn't eaten, hadn't moved. He only held up his notebook, showing them the newest line written in shaky hand. He's right. Not everyone leaves. The fear settles. The group sat in silence, the words burning into them. For the first time, even David couldn't find a rational explanation. The hostel was no longer just a stop on their journey. It had become a trap, and someone, or something, was waiting for one of them not to check out. The Pact. After their confrontation with Harlan Pike, none of them felt safe. That evening in the dorm, David made the proposal. No more taking turns. No more falling asleep. Tonight we all stay awake. If something happens, we'll see it together. No more doubts. The others agreed reluctantly. Even Peter, usually quick with jokes, stayed grim. Emily clutched a flashlight. Sarah kept the guest book on her lap like evidence she could hold. Mark sat against the wall, silent, notebook in hand. The waiting. The hours passed slowly. At first they filled the silence with whispered games and nervous laughter, but as midnight dragged into 1 a.m., conversation died. The hostel creaked around them, the groan of floorboards, the rattle of pipes. Every sound made them stiffen. Mark wrote steadily, his pen scratching in the quiet. "What are you writing?" Emily whispered. He didn't look up. "What he tells me." The incident. At 3:12 a.m. it happened. A sound from the hallway. Deliberate footsteps, slow and heavy. The group froze. David held a finger to his lips. Sarah clutched the guest book tighter. The doorknob rattled. Then, without warning, the door burst open. The group screamed, but there was no one there. The hallway stretched empty, the dim light flickering. And yet, each of them saw something. Sarah swore she saw a tall figure standing at the end of the hall, cloaked in shadow. Peter claimed he saw only the door swing open by itself. Emily insisted there was a hand, pale, bony, gripping the frame before vanishing. David argued the latch was faulty, nothing more. And Mark whispered, he came to see who would follow. The aftermath. They slammed the door shut, bracing it with a chair. No one dared move until dawn broke faintly through the curtains. When they finally opened the door, the hallway looked ordinary. Silent. Empty. But on the floor just outside the threshold, written in chalky letters none of them remembered bringing, was a single phrase. Don't follow me. Fractured memory. By breakfast, the group was arguing. Sarah insisted the figure was real. Peter mocked her for exaggerating. Emily wept, swearing she wasn't imagining the hand. David tried to hold the line of reason, but even his voice shook. Doors don't just write warnings on the floor. And Mark, pale, exhausted, only muttered, he's choosing. Breaking point. After the long night of doors bursting open and warnings written on the floor, the group was fractured. Peter, usually the loudest, now sat pale and silent. He wouldn't touch breakfast, wouldn't meet anyone's eyes. When David pressed him, Peter snapped, I'm done. I'm not spending another night in this place. Sarah tried to argue. Leaving at dawn meant walking miles to the nearest train station through dark woods, but Peter's mind was set. "Stay if you want," he muttered. "But I'm not waiting to be the one who doesn't check out." The plan. That evening, Peter pretended to settle in with the others. But just after 4 a.m., when the group finally drifted into uneasy half-sleep, he quietly slipped from his bunk. He dressed quickly, clutching his backpack, and unlocked the dorm door as silently as he could. Mark stirred slightly, watching him from the shadows. "Don't follow me," Peter whispered with a shaky smile, mocking the phrase that had haunted them. Mark didn't answer. He only stared. The hallway. The hostel was dark, the hallway stretching long and empty. Peter's footsteps echoed too loudly, the old boards creaking under his weight. As he reached the front door, he froze. It was unlocked. Open a crack. Someone had already been through. The woods outside, the woods loomed, black against the faint glow of early dawn. Peter swallowed hard and started down the path. But every few steps he heard it. Another set of footsteps behind him. Slow, matching his pace. He spun around. No one there. "Not funny," he whispered hoarsely. But the footsteps came again. The return. At 6 a.m., David woke to find Peter's bunk empty. Panic spread quickly. The group rushed downstairs, fearing the worst. But to their shock, Peter sat in the common room, pale and trembling. "I tried," he muttered. "I got as far as the woods, but the path just looped. No matter where I walked, I came back here." Emily whispered, "That's impossible." Peter shook his head violently. "I swear, it's like the forest wouldn't let me out." The notebook Mark, silent until now, opened his notebook and pushed it across the table. On the page, written in large, shaky letters, was a single phrase. "Not everyone leaves." Peter stared at it, his face drained of color. The fear settles deeper. The group no longer argued about whether something strange was happening. Now, they only argued about how much time they had left. Emily whispered, "Maybe none of us will leave." Mark didn't look up from his notebook. That's what he wants. The discovery. By their third day, the group was unraveling. Every noise felt like a warning, every shadow like a figure. Emily, restless, wandered the upstairs hallway while the others argued in the dorm. She ran her hand along the peeling wallpaper when her fingers brushed something cold. A seam in the wall, the faint outline of a door. "David," she called softly. "Come here." The others gathered. The door was small, narrow, almost hidden behind a coat rack. No knob, only a rusted keyhole. Sarah frowned. "Why would there be a door here?" Peter muttered. "Because something's behind it." Confronting Harlan. They brought it up to Harlan Pike at breakfast. "There's a locked door upstairs," David said evenly. "What's behind it?" Harlan froze mid-step, tray in his hands. His jaw tightened before he replied. "Storage. Nothing of interest. Guests don't need to concern themselves with it." But Sarah pressed. "Then open it." Harlan's eyes narrowed. "No." He walked away without another word. The key. That night, while the hostel was quiet, Peter slipped into the office. He rifled through drawers until he found an old iron key. "Got it," he whispered, holding it up with a grin that looked more desperate than brave. David hesitated. "Maybe we shouldn't—" But Sarah cut him off. "We've come this far. We're opening it." The hidden room. The key slid into the lock with surprising ease. The door groaned as it opened, dust billowing into the hall. Inside was a small, windowless room. The air was stale, heavy, as though it hadn't been touched in years. Against the far wall sat an old metal bed frame with no mattress. Beside it, a wooden chair, and on the chair, a ledger. Emily picked it up, her hands trembling. It wasn't a guest book. It was a record. Names, dates, notes scribbled in the margins, and among them, Ellison, don't follow. The ledger. The group pored over the ledger, their fear mounting. Some names they didn't recognize, travelers long forgotten. Next to some entries, notes read, checked out, or left early. But others had a different mark. A single line drawn across the name. Mark's name wasn't crossed. Not yet. The realization. Sarah whispered, "This means someone's keeping track. Not just Harlan. Someone else." David shook his head. "Or maybe it is Harlan." Peter muttered, "Then why's my name in here too?" And it was. All of theirs were written in fresh ink. The words on the wall. Before they left, Mark pointed at the wall above the bed frame. Scratched deep into the plaster were words barely visible in the dim light. "He chooses who stays." The door sealed again. They left the room, locking it behind them, but the damage was done. The hostel was no longer just strange. It was deliberate. Someone had been keeping records. Someone had been choosing. And one of them had already been marked. Panic in the dorm. Back in the dormitory, the 5 friends argued until their voices echoed down the thin hallways. Emily was near tears. "We can't stay here another night. We saw the ledger. Our names are in it." "Someone's keeping track of us." Sarah snapped back. "Then we leave. Right now." David hesitated, trying to sound rational. "It's nearly dark. We don't know the roads. The woods are dangerous at night. We should wait until morning." But Peter slammed his fist on the bunk frame. "No more mornings. No more waiting. We're leaving tonight." Mark said nothing. He only held his notebook close, as though protecting it. The attempt. By 9 p.m. they had packed their things. Sarah carried the ledger they'd found, determined to show it to the police once they made it to town. The lobby was empty. The front door stood in sight, its iron latch gleaming under the dim bulb overhead. David pushed it open and froze. The door led not to the road, but straight into the woods, dense, dark, and silent. "That's not right," Emily whispered. "The path should be there. The road." But only endless trees stood before them. The back door. They rushed to the kitchen, where a second door should have led into the garden. David twisted the handle. The hinges groaned, but beyond was not the garden. It was the same dark woods. Peter's voice cracked. "It's the same, no matter which way." The windows. Sarah tried a window in the common room. She shoved it open with effort, the woods swollen with damp. Cool air rushed in. But outside, the woods again, pressing against the frame as if the hostel floated in the middle of the forest. No village lights, no road, no horizon. Only trees. The ledger's warning. Emily flipped through the ledger again with shaking hands. Beneath their names, someone had added a fresh line during the day. They tried to leave. The ink was still wet. Mark speaks. For the first time that night, Mark spoke. His voice was flat, hollow. "He won't let us out. Not until one of us stays." Sarah turned on him. "Who is he, Mark?" "Who keeps writing these things?" Mark looked down at his notebook where new words had appeared in jagged letters. "Don't follow me." His hand was still clutching the pen, though he swore he hadn't moved it. The realization. The group sat in silence, the truth sinking in. They weren't just trapped in the hostel, they were trapped with it. The building had become its own labyrinth, reshaping itself to keep them inside. And escape, it seemed, was no longer a choice. Breaking point. The failed escape attempt left the group shaken beyond repair. They retreated to the dormitory, the single bulb above casting weak light over pale faces. Emily sat rocking on her bunk, whispering to herself. Sarah paced the floor, her fists clenched. David tried to reason, but even his calm voice trembled. Peter snapped first. "It's him. It's been him all along." All eyes turned to Mark. "The blame." Peter pointed. "Every time something happens, he's there. The guest book, the floor, the ledger, his handwriting's all over it. He's the one who won't let us leave." Sarah added, her voice sharp. "He admits he writes things he doesn't remember. How do we know he's not doing this on purpose?" Emily shook her head. "No, it's not Mark. I've seen the look in his eyes. He's scared too." But Peter pressed on. "Scared or acting scared?" Mark's defense. Mark finally spoke, his voice low but steady. "You think I want this? You think I chose it? He uses me. I'm just the pen. He's the hand." Sarah stepped closer. "Who is he, Mark? Stop hiding behind riddles." Mark's eyes flicked to the corner of the room. "He's here, right now, watching." David followed his gaze but saw only shadows. "Mark, there's no one there." But Mark only shook his head. "That's what he wants you to believe." The ledger. Again. Sarah opened the ledger they'd taken from the hidden room. Beneath their names, another line had appeared since they'd last looked. "One will stay tonight." Emily gasped. "It's deciding for us." David tried to reason. "It can't just appear. Someone wrote it. Maybe Harlan." But the words had the same jagged scrawl as before, the same as in Mark's notebook. The rift. Peter lunged forward, grabbing Mark by the collar. "Admit it. Admit you're the one keeping us here." David pulled him back. "Stop it. This isn't helping." But Sarah's voice was cold. "Maybe it is him. And if it is, then we have to stop him before one of us really doesn't check out." Mark's warning. Mark stood, trembling, his notebook clutched tight. His voice rose for the first time, urgent, almost pleading. "You don't understand. If you blame me, you'll play right into his hands. That's what he wants. Division. Fear. That's how he chooses." His eyes locked on Sarah's. "And once he chooses, you can't fight it." Silence. The group fell into uneasy silence. No one spoke again until dawn, but trust was gone. The hostel had succeeded in its cruelest trick, turning them against one another. The dorm in silence. After the brutal argument, the group retreated into themselves. No one trusted anyone else. Emily cried softly into her pillow. Sarah lay stiff on her bunk, staring at the ceiling. David sat near the door, arms crossed, trying to look like a guard, though his hands trembled. Peter muttered under his breath, glaring at Mark. Mark sat in the corner, notebook open, eyes unfocused, as if listening to someone only he could hear. The crackle. Just after 2 a.m., the silence broke. A faint crackle echoed through the walls, metallic and unnatural. At first, they thought it was the pipes, but then Sarah sat up sharply. "It's the intercom," she whispered. The hostel had an old intercom system built decades ago, speakers set in the hallways and common rooms. They'd noticed them before. Dust-covered, unused. Now, one in the dormitory ceiling hissed alive. The voice. The crackle deepened, followed by a long breath. Then a voice. Male. Low. "He's chosen." The group froze. Emily clutched David's arm. "Who's there?" she cried. The voice ignored her. After a pause, it whispered again. "Don't follow me. Then the speaker went dead. The panic. Peter leapt to his feet. "That was him! That was Mark's voice!" Mark shook his head violently. No, it wasn't me. It was him. The one I've been telling you about." Sarah turned on him. "How convenient. The same words, the same voice, always through you." Emily sobbed. But it didn't sound exactly like Mark. It was slower, colder, like something else was using his voice. Searching the hostel. David, desperate for answers, dragged them all out into the hallway. They followed the wires from the intercom, down into the common room. Another speaker there crackled faintly, as though the echo of the voice still lingered. But the office, where the system's controls should have been, was locked. Sarah pounded on the door. "Harlan, open this! We know you're in there!" No response. The only sound was static humming through the speakers, like breath behind a wall. The ledger again. Back upstairs, they checked the ledger. Another note had appeared beneath their names. He spoke tonight. The ink was still damp. The realization. David rubbed his face with trembling hands. It's not just the guest book, not just the notebook. The whole building is speaking to us now. Mark whispered, "I told you. It's him. And he's everywhere." Breaking the door. By mid-morning, fear had hardened into anger. Sarah refused to sit in silence any longer. "We're not waiting for him to choose," she said, gripping the ledger. "We're finding out what Pike's hiding." Peter nodded, eager for an outlet for his frustration. With David's reluctant help, they forced the lock on the office door. The wood splintered under their weight. The office smelled of dust and tobacco. Faded curtains blocked most of the light. Papers lay stacked high on the desk, some yellowed with age, others crisp and recent. The records Emily moved first, rifling through the piles. "It's guest records," she whispered. "Names, dates of stay." At first they looked ordinary, but deeper into the stack, they found files with no checkout dates, only the word "stayed" scrawled across them. Mark's name was there, written fresh, only days old. Beneath his name, in smaller letters, someone had written, "Don't follow." The photograph. Sarah pulled an envelope from the drawer. Inside was a faded photograph. A young man smiling, standing in front of another hostel. The year on the back read 1996. Emily gasped. "That's the boy the shopkeeper mentioned, the one who vanished at Pike's last hostel." David studied the photo. "And Pike kept this all these years?" On the margin, written faintly in pencil, was the phrase, "He stayed." The journal. Peter found a small leather-bound journal in the desk. Flipping it open, he read aloud in disbelief. "The house chooses. I only keep its records. I cannot stop it. I can only mark the ones it takes." The entries stretched back decades, notes on guests who left, guests who didn't, and in the margins, over and over again, "Don't follow me." The realization. Emily covered her mouth. "He's known all along. Every time someone disappears, he writes it down, like it's normal." Sarah hissed, "He's not just keeping records. He's helping it, feeding it." Mark, pale, whispered, "No, he's afraid of it, just like us." The interruption. Before they could argue further, a sound came from the hallway. Slow, deliberate footsteps, heavier than before. They froze. The footsteps stopped right outside the office door, then a knock. 3 slow raps against the wood. Sarah clutched the ledger to her chest. Peter gripped the journal. Emily whispered, "It's him." But when David yanked the door open, the hall was empty. Only the faint smell of cigarette smoke lingered. The ledger again. Back at the desk, they noticed a new line had appeared in Pike's journal, though no one had touched it. They broke the office. He's watching. The confrontation. They found Harlan Pike in the common room late that afternoon, standing by the fireplace, though no fire burned. He didn't look startled when the group stormed in, carrying the ledger and his journal. Sarah slammed them onto the table. "You've been keeping records. Names, disappearances, all of it. You knew." Harlan didn't flinch. His hands rested calmly on the back of a chair. "I warned you. Some leave, some don't." The confession. David's voice shook with controlled anger. "What are you talking about? Why write it all down?" Harlan's gaze lifted slowly, meeting each of their eyes in turn. "Because someone has to. The house chooses, always has. Long before me. I only witness, record, keep the ledger." Emily trembled. "That boy in the photo. The one from 1996. What happened to him?" Harlan's face tightened, but his voice remained flat. "He stayed, like others before him, like one of you will." The caretaker's role. Peter spat. "So you're just letting it happen? Letting people vanish?" Harlan leaned forward slightly, his voice lowering. "I don't let it happen. I can't stop it. None of us can. But the house, it doesn't like chaos. Someone must keep order. Someone must carry the burden. That's me." He tapped the ledger gently. "The caretaker. The one who remembers." The group splinters. Further. Sarah's eyes blazed. "No. You're not just a witness. You're part of it. You lock doors, you hide records, you scare people into silence." Emily whispered, "Maybe he's right. Maybe he doesn't have a choice." Peter barked out a bitter laugh. "That's exactly what a guilty man would say." David rubbed his temples. "Enough. Whether he's victim or villain doesn't matter. What matters is, how do we get out?" Harlan's warning. Harlan's voice grew cold. "There is no way out until it decides. Fight it, and you'll only make it worse." Mark, silent until now, spoke softly. "He's telling the truth. I felt it. He's been speaking through me since we got here." The others recoiled. Sarah snapped, "And you just accept that?" Mark's eyes were distant. "What choice do I have?" The ominous line. Before anyone could respond, Harlan pointed at the ledger still lying open on the table. A new line had appeared beneath their names, written in the same jagged hand as always. "The caretaker speaks. One will stay tonight." The ink glistened. Fresh. The silence. The group stood frozen. Harlan finally straightened, his face grim. "You see, even as we argue, it listens, it writes, it waits." He turned toward the stairs. "I suggest you pray you're not the one." And then he left them alone, the ledger still open, the words burning into their minds. The dread of night. By sunset, no one spoke of leaving. They had tried. The hostel wouldn't let them. Instead, they prepared themselves for another night of waiting. They locked the dormitory door, wedged a chair beneath the knob, and sat together in a tight circle, the air heavy with dread. Every tick of the old wall clock dragged like a nail across their nerves. Peter muttered, "He said one of us stays tonight. That means one of us doesn't wake up." Emily flinched. "Don't say that." Sarah snapped. "We don't have the luxury of pretending anymore." The unraveling. Mark sat apart from the others, pressed into the corner, scribbling furiously in his notebook. His lips moved silently, whispering words only he could hear. David tried to reach him. "Mark, talk to us. Stay with us." But Mark didn't look up. He wrote and wrote, his pen tearing into the paper. Emily crawled closer, her voice trembling. "What is he writing?" Mark finally lifted the notebook, his eyes glassy. Across the page in jagged rows were the words, "It's me. It's me. It's me." The argument. Sarah recoiled. "He's admitting it. He's the one." Peter jumped to his feet. "I knew it. I said it from the start. He's the reason we're trapped." David shouted over them. "Stop! You're feeding into this. That's exactly what it wants. For us to tear each other apart." But Sarah's voice shook with fury. "If we don't stop him, one of us will be next." The whisper. Suddenly, the intercom crackled again. A low voice, distorted, filled the room. "He's chosen." The group froze. The voice continued. "Don't follow me." The speaker went dead. Mark dropped his notebook, his whole body trembling. "It's not me," he whispered. "He's using me. Can't you see that?" The fear peaks. Emily began to sob. "We can't survive like this. And we can't keep waiting for the house to pick one of us." Peter paced the room, muttering curses. Sarah pressed her back against the door as though bracing for it to burst open. David's hands shook, but his voice was steady. "We make it to morning. That's all we can do. Just make it to morning." The clock strikes 3. At exactly 3:00 a.m., the clock in the hall chimed 3 hollow notes. The lights flickered. The chair braced against the door slid an inch across the floor. Mark clutched his head, screaming. "He's here!" The waiting. They huddled together, every nerve alive, every sound amplified. But the door never opened. No footsteps followed. Only the heavy silence of the hostel pressed in. When dawn finally bled pale light through the window, the group still sat rigid, exhausted, and broken. But all 5 were still alive. For now. Morning after. The dawn light was thin, gray, and weak. None of them had truly slept. They sat in silence on their bunks, hollow-eyed, their nerves frayed to threads. Emily clutched David's sleeve like a child. Sarah's arms were folded, her jaw tight. Peter paced, muttering curses under his breath. Mark stared at the floor, his notebook lying closed at his feet for once. For the briefest moment, the group almost believed the night was behind them. Until Sarah noticed the wall. The words on the plaster above Mark's bunk, deep scratches formed jagged letters, etched as though by a knife or claw. "He stays." The group froze. David whispered, "That wasn't there last night." Sarah ran her fingers across the grooves. The plaster flaked under her touch. "It's carved. Fresh." Peter hissed, "Then it's decided. It's him. Mark's the one who stays." Mark's denial. Mark shot to his feet, eyes wild. "No! I didn't do this!" Peter advanced on him. "Who else could have? It's over your bed." Every warning matches your handwriting, your voice, and now the wall, too. Mark's hands shook. "It's not me. It's him. He wants you to blame me." Sarah snapped. "And it's working." The division. Emily's voice cracked. "Stop it! All of you! What if it's none of us? What if it's the house itself?" But no one wanted to hear it. Peter shouted, "I'm not dying because he wants to play puppet for some ghost." David tried to hold the line. "Listen, fighting each other won't help. If it is Mark, blaming him won't change anything. If it's not, then we're wasting time. But his words felt thin, hollow against the weight of the carved message. The ledger again. Sarah checked the ledger, her hands trembling. Beneath their names, another note had appeared. The wall speaks when paper fails. Emily nearly dropped it. It's not even using books anymore. It's everywhere. The silence. For the rest of the morning, no one spoke much. Every glance at Mark was sharp with suspicion. Every glance at the wall a reminder that time was running short. Mark sat clutching his notebook, though he hadn't opened it since dawn. His lips moved silently, as though he was bargaining with something no one else could hear. The afternoon. By afternoon, the group debated again whether to try leaving, but fear held them still. The woods outside pressed closer with every look out the window. Emily whispered, "We'll never get out. We're just waiting to see who the house takes." Mark's voice was a hoarse whisper. "It already knows." The fracture. By midday, the group was stretched thin, each conversation brittle and sharp. The carved words on the wall, "He stays," had poisoned any hope of unity. Sarah wanted to confront Pike again. Peter muttered about barricading the door until rescue came. Emily whispered about praying. David tried to reason, but the group's patience with him was gone. And Mark sat apart, silent, staring at his unopened notebook. The disappearance. At some point that afternoon, they realized Emily was gone. David noticed first. "Where's Emily?" They searched the dorm, the common room, the kitchen. Nothing. Sarah's voice rose in panic. "We said we wouldn't split up." Peter growled. "She's probably with Pike. Or worse." Mark whispered, "The house called her." The search. They scoured the hostel, calling her name. Hallways twisted, doors led back into the same rooms. The woods outside loomed through the windows closer than before, branches pressing against the glass. In the laundry room, they found her scarf on the floor. In the hallway, her flashlight, still warm to the touch. But no Emily. The return hours later, just as the group was about to break completely, Emily stumbled back into the dorm. Her hair was disheveled, her eyes glassy. She looked pale, almost sick. Sarah rushed forward. "Where were you?" "We searched everywhere." Emily blinked at her, confused. I don't know." Peter snapped. "Don't give us that. You vanished for hours." Emily shook her head, trembling. "I was just walking. I thought I was in the hall. But the hall kept changing. Every turn, every corner, it was the same. I didn't even realize time had passed." The Mark David noticed something on her wrist. Faint red scratches, as though a hand had gripped her tightly. "Emily," he whispered, "what happened to you?" She pulled her sleeve down quickly. "Nothing. I don't want to talk about it." Mark, watching from the corner, whispered, "He touched her. That means she's marked now." The ledger. When Sarah checked the ledger, another new line had appeared beneath their names. She wandered. She returned. For now. The ink was still wet. The fear. That night, Emily sat shaking, refusing to meet anyone's eyes. Sarah stayed close to her side, but Peter kept muttering that she couldn't be trusted anymore. David tried to hold them together, but even he looked rattled. Mark only whispered, "The house is playing with us. It doesn't take all at once. It chooses. Slowly." The uneasy night. Sleep was impossible after Emily's disappearance and return. They huddled together in the dorm, too afraid to separate even for a moment. David kept his back against the door. Sarah and Emily sat close on one bunk, whispering to each other. Peter stayed restless, pacing, flashlight in hand. Mark lay on his mattress, staring at the ceiling, his notebook unopened for the first time in days. When at last they drifted into uneasy sleep, it was out of sheer exhaustion. The sound. Somewhere around 3:30 a.m., Sarah woke with a start. A soft creak echoed from the hallway. She shook David awake. Listen. The doorknob rattled. David held his breath. Slowly, he slid the chair away and cracked the door open just an inch, and froze. The figure. Standing in the hallway was Peter. Or at least, someone who looked exactly like him. His back was to the door, his posture stiff, head tilted at an unnatural angle as if listening to something none of them could hear. David turned back into the room. Peter was still there, asleep on his bunk, flashlight clutched tight in his hands. David's blood ran cold. The confrontation. He whispered urgently, "Sarah, Peter's outside." Sarah blinked in confusion, then glanced at the bunk. "No, he's right here." Emily woke next, then Mark. They all crowded to the door. Through the crack, they watched the hallway version of Peter slowly raise a hand and press it against the wall. His fingers dragged across the plaster, leaving faint scratches. Then he whispered, in Peter's voice but lower, distorted, "Don't follow me." The panic. Sarah shoved the door shut, heart pounding. Peter jolted awake. "What the hell's going on?" David's voice shook. You were outside." Peter laughed nervously. "I've been here the whole time." But when they looked at the wall in the hallway again at dawn, deep scratches formed words just outside their door. "He walks in both places." The ledger. The ledger confirmed it. A new entry beneath their names. One was seen twice. He stays soon. Peter swore, slamming his fist into the bunk. "It's trying to frame me now. First Mark, now me." Sarah's voice was brittle. "Or maybe it doesn't need to frame anyone. Maybe it's just choosing." The division deepens. Emily curled into herself, trembling. "If it can make copies of us, how do we even know who's real anymore?" Mark whispered from his corner. "That's how it wins. It divides us until none of us trust the other. Then it takes the one left alone." His eyes flicked toward Peter. "And maybe that's you." The confrontation. By morning, their nerves were frayed beyond reason. The scratches outside the dorm, the double Peter in the hallway. It was too much. David led the charge. They found Harlan Pike in the kitchen, smoking by the back door. Sarah slammed the ledger onto the table. "Enough! We saw him. We all saw him. A copy of Peter. Just standing there. What is happening here?" Harlan didn't flinch. He took a long drag of his cigarette, exhaled, and said quietly, "So, you've seen it too." The admission. Emily whispered, "You mean it's happened before?" Harlan nodded slowly. "The first time was years ago, back at my old hostel. A boy disappeared, not unlike your friend Ellison. But before he was gone, one of the others saw him walking the halls, even though he was still in his bed." Peter's fists clenched. "So this thing makes copies of us. Why?" Harlan's eyes were tired, sunken. "Not copies. Shadows. The house plays with what it wants. A rehearsal, maybe. A warning." The past. He leaned back, his gaze drifting as if seeing another time. That boy's name was Callum Hayes. One night, his bunk was empty. His bag was left behind. But a week earlier, one of the guests swore they saw him wandering the halls twice in the same hour, once in the kitchen, once still asleep. Emily's voice cracked. And then he was gone. Harlan nodded. Gone without a trace, just like your friend may be. To group, splinters. Further, Peter spat. So you knew this would happen to us, and you let us stay? Harlan's expression hardened. Do you think you'd have believed me if I told you? Would you have left? The house doesn't let go. Not once it's chosen. Sarah hissed. Then you're its accomplice. You don't just witness. You enable it. But Harlan shook his head. I'm only its keeper. Someone has to hold the records. Someone has to warn the next ones. Even if they don't listen. The ledger's new line. David flipped the ledger open with shaking hands. A fresh entry gleamed in wet ink. The double was seen. The keeper remembers. Sarah slammed it shut, trembling. It's listening to us right now. The warning. Harlan's voice dropped to a near whisper. If you've seen the double, then you know it's close. One of you will stay. That is how it's always been. Emily began to cry. No, there has to be a way out. But Harlan's eyes were hollow. I've been here 30 years, girl. If there's a way out, I've never found it. The weight of truth. The group staggered back to the dorm, the knowledge heavier than anything they'd faced yet. Not only had this happened before, it had always ended the same way. And now the hostel wasn't just choosing between them, it was rehearsing. The pressure mounts. Back in the dormitory, the air was thick with tension. No one trusted anyone anymore. Sarah kept pacing, the ledger clutched in her arms as if it were proof of something only she understood. Peter sat on his bunk, glaring at Mark like a wolf ready to spring. Emily curled up, whispering prayers under her breath. David tried again to mediate. We can't lose ourselves. That's exactly what this place wants. We survive by staying together. But no one was listening anymore. The spark. Peter suddenly stood. I've had enough. It's him. He pointed at Mark, who sat pale and silent, his notebook unopened. Every warning, every scribble, every shadow, all tied to him. If we get rid of him, maybe we get out. Sarah snapped. And what if you're wrong? What if it's you? We saw your double in the hallway. Maybe the house already picked you. Peter's face twisted with fury. Don't you dare! The explosion. Before anyone could stop him, Peter lunged at Mark, knocking him back onto the floor. Mark struggled weakly, shouting, It's not me! It's not me! David pulled at Peter's arm, shouting, Stop! You'll kill him! But Peter's voice was wild. Better him than us! The ledger moves. In the chaos, the ledger slipped from Sarah's hands, falling open on the floor. Emily gasped. Fresh words were appearing across the page, the ink forming even as they watched. Violence begins. He chooses through them. The aftermath. David finally dragged Peter off, pinning him against the wall. Peter was breathing hard, his eyes wild with fear more than anger. Mark sat trembling, clutching his notebook to his chest. This is what it wants. It feeds on us turning against each other. Sarah's hands shook as she lifted the ledger again. Then we're already giving it what it wants. The silence. After. No one spoke for a long time. Emily sobbed quietly. Peter muttered curses under his breath. David sat with his head in his hands, and Mark, staring at the wall, whispered, He'll take the one left alone. That's how he chooses. He waits for weakness. The new Mark. That evening, as the last light of day slipped away, they noticed something carved into the wood of Peter's bunk, fresh scratches that hadn't been there before. 2 words, deep and jagged. He stays. Marked. All day, Peter could not take his eyes off the scratches carved into his bunk. He stays. He ran his fingers over the grooves until they were raw. Every time David or Sarah tried to pull him away, he snapped, "Don't touch it! It's about me! It's already about me!" Emily whispered to Sarah, "He's breaking." Sarah whispered back, "We all are." The watch. That night, they tried once more to keep vigil together. But the air was heavier than ever, thick with the inevitability of something none of them wanted to name. Peter refused to lie down. He sat on his bunk, clutching his flashlight like a weapon. His eyes darted to the door, the corners, the ceiling. David warned him gently, "Paranoia will kill us faster than this house." Peter hissed, "It's not paranoia if it's true." The sight around 3:00 a.m. Emily stirred awake and let out a sharp cry. Everyone snapped to attention and froze. Because standing at Peter's bunk was another Peter. The figure was identical. Same clothes, same build, but its face was slack, its eyes dull and lifeless. It stood perfectly still, staring down at the real Peter, who sat frozen in place. The clash. Sarah screamed. David lunged forward, swinging the chair they had wedged against the door. The figure staggered backward but did not vanish. It opened its mouth. The voice was Peter's, but lower, distorted, as if stretched too thin. "Don't follow me." The real Peter shrieked and swung his flashlight at it. For a moment, the beam cut through the figure, and it dissolved like smoke, vanishing into the air. The aftermath. Peter collapsed onto the floor, trembling. "That was me. It was me. It's already taken me." Sarah shouted, "No, you're still here. You're alive." But Peter shook his head violently. "Not for long. You saw it. It's only a matter of time." The ledger. Emily, sobbing, opened the ledger again. A new entry gleamed fresh. He saw himself. He will stay. The fracture deepens. No one could calm Peter after that. He paced the room until dawn, muttering, "It's me. It's me. It's me." Mark watched him silently, then whispered, "It doesn't matter who. What matters is how he stays. That's the part you should fear." The others turned toward him, horrified. But Mark only lowered his gaze back to the floor. The breaking point. By the following evening, Peter was no longer himself. His eyes were sunken, his voice hoarse from muttering the same words. "It's me. It's me. It's me." Sarah tried to comfort him. "We'll find a way out. You're not doomed." But Peter snapped, "Don't lie to me. You saw it. You all saw it. I'm already gone." David placed a firm hand on his shoulder. "Then fight it." Peter's laugh was sharp, bitter. "Fight it. Fine. I'll fight it the only way I can." The plan. When the others finally dozed into restless half-sleep, Peter slipped from the dorm. Sarah woke at the creak of the door and shook David awake. By the time they followed, Peter was already in the common room, clutching a can of kerosene from the storage closet. Emily gasped. "Peter, no!" He sloshed the liquid across the floorboards, the smell sharp and suffocating. "If the house wants me, then I'll burn with it. I'll take it down first." Sarah shouted, "You'll kill us all!" But Peter only struck a match. The fire. The flames caught instantly, racing up the wooden walls. The heat surged, smoke filling the air. For one wild moment, it looked like freedom. The house groaned, beams cracking, plaster curling. But then, impossibly, the fire began to twist. The flames bent back into the walls as though sucked inward. The smoke coiled upward into the ceiling, vanishing into cracks that sealed themselves shut. Within minutes, the blaze was gone. The hostel stood untouched. The punishment. On the floor where the fire had been, black letters now burned into the wood, charred and smoldering though no ash remained. He stays for trying. Peter dropped the spent match from his trembling fingers. His face went white. Emily screamed, clutching David. Sarah covered her mouth with shaking hands. Mark whispered, "You made him angry." The ledger. Back in the dorm, Sarah opened the ledger with trembling hands. A fresh line had appeared. The fire failed. His place is sealed. Peter sank onto his bunk, shaking violently. It's over. It's me. There's no fighting it now. No one argued with him this time. The weight of doom. As night fell again, the group huddled in silence. No one dared sleep. Peter stared at the ceiling, hollow-eyed, whispering over and over, "It's me. It's me. It's me." And outside the dorm door, faint footsteps paced back and forth, patient, waiting. The long night. They had all tried to watch Peter that night. Sarah sat closest, arms folded, the ledger clutched to her chest. David dozed in a chair by the door, trying to block it with his weight. Emily curled beside her bunk, whispering prayers. Mark never slept. He watched Peter silently, as though waiting for the moment he already knew would come. Peter lay stiff on his bunk, muttering until his voice cracked. "It's me. It's me. It's me." At some point, exhaustion pulled the others into shallow, restless sleep. The silence. When Sarah woke at dawn, the first thing she noticed was the silence. No muttering, no pacing, no sound at all. Her gaze snapped to Peter's bunk. It was empty. The belongings. His backpack sat neatly at the foot of the bed. His flashlight, folded shirt, and wallet lay arranged in a tidy row on the mattress. Even his shoes were placed side by side, as if waiting. But Peter himself was gone. Emily screamed, clutching David. "No! No, we were watching him! We were watching!" David's voice cracked. "The door's still blocked. He didn't leave." Mark whispered, "He didn't leave through the door." The ledger. Sarah, shaking, opened the ledger with trembling hands. A new line gleamed fresh across the page. He stayed. Just 2 words. Nothing more. The aftermath. Emily wept uncontrollably, rocking in place. David stared at the empty bunk in shock, unable to move. Sarah slammed the ledger shut and hurled it across the room, screaming, "No more! No more of this!" Mark sat perfectly still, his voice flat. "It's never been about stopping it, only about recording it. That's what the house does. That's what Pike does. That's why Peter's gone." The carved message. As Sarah turned back to the bunk, she saw new scratches carved into the wood, deep and ragged. This time, 4 words. "Don't follow me. Ever." The realization. 3 gone now in spirit, 1 gone in body. The group was down to 4, and the house was still hungry. The aftermath. Peter's absence hung heavy in the dormitory. His neatly arranged belongings made it worse, as if he had checked out politely, leaving only silence behind. Emily refused to look at his bunk. She curled into a ball on her own, shaking violently. Sarah clutched the ledger like a weapon, though she hadn't dared open it since. David stood at the door, his face pale, whispering, "We should have stopped him. We should have tied him down." Mark spoke softly, staring at nothing. You can't tie down what the house has already chosen. Emily's change. By afternoon, they noticed something different about Emily. She moved slower, her eyes glassy, as though she were drifting somewhere far away. Sarah asked gently, "Emily, are you all right?" Emily blinked slowly. I hear him." David frowned. "Who?" Emily's lips trembled. "Peter. He's calling from the walls." The voice. That night, as they sat in the common room, Emily jerked upright. "Shh. Listen." At first, the others heard nothing. Then, faint, muffled, a man's voice, Peter's voice. "Don't follow me!" The sound seemed to come from everywhere at once. The walls, the ceiling, the floor. Emily pressed her hands to her ears, crying, "He won't stop. He won't stop whispering." The suspicion. Sarah turned on her. "It's not him, Emily. It's the house. It's using him." Emily shook her head violently. "No. It's him. He's still here. He wants me to come." Mark muttered, "She's marked. The house touched her when she disappeared before. Now it's pulling her closer." David snapped, "Stop saying that!" But even his voice wavered. The ledger again. Sarah finally opened the ledger with shaking hands. A new entry glistened on the page. "She hears him. She will stay." Emily stared at the words, her face pale. It's already decided. The carving. Back in the dorm, they found new scratches etched into the wood of Emily's bunk. This time, the message was longer. She follows. He waits. Emily collapsed onto the bed, sobbing. "I don't want to go. I don't want to go." But her tears only made the others more certain. The house had chosen again. The fear. Sarah whispered to David, "First Peter, now her. One by one until it's just—" She couldn't finish. Mark's voice was flat. "Until the house is done." The long day. The day after Peter was gone, the hostel seemed to breathe heavier. Every creak of the floor, every groan of the pipes felt deliberate, alive. Emily refused to leave her bunk. She kept whispering, "He's calling me," over and over. Sarah stayed close to her, gripping her hand, trying to anchor her. David paced, muttering plans of escape that sounded less convincing each time. Mark only watched, silent, as if waiting for something inevitable. The voice again. That night, the voice returned. This time it was clearer. Peter's voice, but drawn out, distorted, echoing through the walls. "Emily, come with me." Emily sat up sharply, her eyes wide and glassy. "Do you hear him? He needs me." Sarah shouted, "It's not him! It's the house!" But Emily was already standing, moving toward the door as if sleepwalking. The struggle. David grabbed her arm. "No, you're not leaving this room." Emily's voice was eerily calm. "He's waiting just outside. If I don't go, he'll keep calling." Sarah begged, "Emily, please don't." But Emily's strength was unnatural. She tore herself free and yanked open the door. The hallway stretched dark and silent. For one moment she turned back, her face blank. Then she whispered, "Don't follow me," and stepped into the darkness. The search. Sarah screamed, running after her. David followed, dragging Mark with him. The hallway twisted and bent. Every turn looked the same, endless doors leading nowhere. Emily's footsteps echoed ahead, quick but steady. They chased her voice, until suddenly it stopped. They turned a final corner, and she was gone. What she left behind. Back in the dorm, hours later, Sarah collapsed onto Emily's bunk, sobbing. That's when she saw it. On Emily's pillow lay her necklace, a small silver cross she never took off. The chain was snapped clean in two, and beneath the pillow, scratched into the wood of the bed frame, was a new message. She stayed. The ledger. David opened the ledger with trembling hands. The ink was still fresh. She followed. She stayed. The silence. There were only 3 of them now. Sarah clung to David, whispering, "It'll be me next. Or you. One by one until—" Mark cut her off, his voice hollow. "Until it's done." He lifted his notebook, and for the first time the words weren't scribbled. They were clean, deliberate. 2 more. The last 3. The dormitory felt cavernous without Peter and Emily. Only 3 bunks were filled now, 3 voices left to echo in the silence. Sarah's grief had hardened into anger. She clutched the ledger like a weapon, pacing the room. "No more waiting, no more letting it pick us off. I'm done playing its game." David rubbed his face, exhausted. "What are you suggesting? You can't fight walls, you can't fight whatever this is." Sarah's jaw tightened. "Then I'll burn the ledger. I'll destroy its words. If it feeds on them, I'll starve it." Mark's voice was flat, almost pitying. "It doesn't matter if you burn the ledger. The words will find somewhere else. The walls, the floors, me. You can't silence it." Sarah snapped back. "Then I'll try anyway." The fire. That evening, while David argued for caution, Sarah slipped into the common room with the ledger tucked under her arm. She lit one of the old oil lamps from the mantel, the flame flickering weakly. Holding the book above it, she hissed, "You don't get to write our lives anymore." The pages curled, blackened, smoke rising into the stale air. For a moment, she felt triumphant, until the smoke stopped drifting upward. It bent sideways, sucked straight into the walls. The backlash. The lamps in the hostel flickered wildly. The floorboards trembled under her feet. And on the walls of the common room, black words appeared, searing themselves into the plaster as though written by fire. "She defies, she stays." Sarah screamed, dropping the burning book. David rushed in, stamping out the flame with his jacket, but the words kept spreading across the walls, multiplying until the room was covered. "She stays, she stays, she stays." The punishment. Back in the dorm, Sarah's bunk groaned violently. The wood split, the mattress sagging as if invisible hands were tearing it apart. Carved into the headboard, deep and jagged, new words appeared before their eyes. "Tonight." Sarah's face went white. David grabbed her shoulders. "We'll fight it together. We won't let it take you." But Sarah's hands shook as she whispered, "I think it already has." The ledger's return. Mark, who had stood silent through the chaos, lifted his notebook. On its open page, written in his own trembling hand, though he swore he hadn't touched it, were 3 words. "She stays, tonight." The waiting. The 3 of them sat in silence as darkness fell. Every creak of the hostel felt heavier, every gust of wind like breath on their necks. David clutched Sarah's hand. Mark stared at the floor, his voice low. "It punishes defiance. Always has." Sarah whispered back, her voice breaking but resolute. "Then let it try." The vigil. That night, David refused to let Sarah out of his sight. He sat beside her bunk, gripping her hand tightly, as if sheer will could anchor her to the world. Sarah tried to sound strong, but her voice trembled. "Don't waste yourself on me. If the house wants me, it'll take me. David shook his head. Not if I don't let go. Mark, seated in the corner with his notebook, whispered, It doesn't matter. The ledger already said it. She stays tonight. Sarah snapped at him. Then write something else. Change it. If it listens to you, make it say I leave. Mark only lowered his eyes. It doesn't work like that. The hour. At exactly 3:00 a.m., the walls began to groan. The floorboards shifted, trembling like the earth itself was alive. The lamps flickered, shadows leaping across the walls. Sarah clutched David's hand tighter. Don't let go. David held on with both hands now, knuckles white. I won't. I swear it. Then came the sound. A low, grinding scrape, as though something enormous was moving through the walls. The attack. Without warning, Sarah was yanked backward, her body jerking violently as if pulled by unseen hands. David screamed, tightening his grip, dragging her halfway off the bunk before she was ripped away again. Emily had vanished quietly. Peter had slipped like smoke. But Sarah's taking was brutal. Her fingernails tore at the sheets. She kicked, screamed, Don't let me go! David fought, pulling her with all his strength. For one moment, he thought he had her. But the hostel had other plans. The mattress split open beneath her, gaping like a mouth. Hands, gray, twisted, clawed out of the stuffing, wrapping around her wrists, her ankles, her throat. David screamed as Sarah was dragged downward into the bed itself. Her last words before she vanished were a ragged whisper. Don't follow me. And then, the mattress snapped shut. The aftermath. The dorm was silent. The only evidence she had ever been there was her necklace, broken in two, lying on the floor where David knelt. David collapsed, sobbing. I promised her. I promised. Mark's voice was hollow, flat. It was never your promise to keep. The house had already decided. The ledger. When Mark finally opened his notebook, the words were already waiting. She stayed. 2 remain. The silence. David stared at the bunk, rage and despair twisting inside him. It's you or me next, Mark whispered, almost to himself. Or maybe both. The dorm of silence. The dormitory, once filled with laughter and chatter, now held only 2 breaths. David's heavy and uneven, Mark's slow and deliberate. Peter's bunk was empty. Emily's necklace remained on her pillow. Sarah's bed looked as though it had devoured her whole. The hostel seemed quieter now, as though satisfied, but not yet finished. The divide. David sat on the edge of his bunk, fists clenched. It's you. It's always been you. The guest book, the walls, the ledger, all of it points to you. Mark didn't argue. He sat cross-legged on his bed, notebook open. His pen moved steadily, though his eyes never left David. What are you writing? David demanded. Mark's voice was flat. The last entry. The ledger's words. David stormed across the room, yanking the notebook from Mark's hands. But when he looked down, his blood ran cold. The page was filled, the ink still wet. One will leave, one will stay. And beneath that, in jagged letters, Don't follow me. David threw the book across the room. You're the one it wants. You've been its mouthpiece since the start. Mark only whispered, Maybe. Or maybe I'm the only one who survives to tell it. The argument rage boiled over. David grabbed Mark by the collar. If it's between us, then I'll make sure it's you who stays. Mark's eyes were empty. That's how it chooses. Violence. Fear. You're already playing its game. David's grip trembled. Then what do we do? Sit here and wait for it to pick us off? Mark's answer was a whisper. Yes, that's the only way. The intercom. Suddenly, the intercom crackled to life again. The distorted voice filled the room. The last two. Both men froze. The voice continued, slow and deliberate. One will walk, one will stay. Don't follow me. Then silence. The hallway. The dorm door creaked open by itself. Beyond, the hallway stretched dark and endless. David's heart pounded. It wants us to choose. Mark shook his head. It already has. The breaking point. For hours they sat in silence, neither willing to step into the hall, neither able to sleep. Finally, David whispered, I won't be the one who stays. I can't. I won't. Mark closed his eyes. Then maybe you should go. The dormitory was suffocating. 2 bunks filled, 3 empty. The silence pressed down heavier than any scream. David sat at the door, staring into the dark hallway. Mark sat cross-legged on his bed, his notebook resting in his lap. Neither spoke. Both knew words no longer mattered. At some point, David whispered, We're not both walking out. You know that. Mark's voice was calm, almost detached. The house already knows who stays. At 4:00 a.m., the dorm door opened by itself, slowly, deliberately, as though inviting them. Beyond lay the hallway, longer than it had ever appeared, stretching into blackness without end. The intercom crackled one final time. Walk or stay. Then silence. David rose, fists clenched, his body trembling. He looked at Mark. I won't be the one. Mark met his gaze, expression unreadable. Then go. David hesitated, then stepped into the hallway. His footsteps echoed, swallowed by the dark. For a moment, he thought he was free. The hall stretched forward, wider, brighter. He felt air on his face, fresh and cold. But when he glanced back, the dormitory was gone. So was Mark. Morning came. The hostel stood silent, the dormitory empty, Peter's belongings neatly folded, Emily's necklace on her pillow, Sarah's bunk split. Mark's notebook lay open on his bed. Only one line had been written, in jagged, uneven ink. I stayed. David's name was not there. When investigators later entered the hostel, they found no sign of struggle. All belongings were intact. The guest book's final page contained only 5 names, none with checkout dates, and at the bottom, one faint line, Don't follow me. The Ashridge Hostel closed within the year. Travelers whispered of curses, of guests who never checked out. Locals crossed the road rather than look at its windows. But the building still stands, shuttered, waiting. Some nights, passers-by swear they hear footsteps in the hallways, or a man's voice whispering through the cracks. He stayed. And that concludes the story of the Ashridge Hostel disappearance. A case without answers, where 5 friends entered, and only silence remained. If you've followed this tale through to the end, thank you. Don't forget to subscribe for more true crime bedtime stories, mysteries that linger long after the lights go out. And remember, some doors, once opened, should never be followed through. Good night.